I am Joseph Plaster. I am director of the Winston Tabb Special Collections Research Center and curator in public humanities for the Sheridan Libraries. In early 2020, I collaborated with the Baltimore Youth Film Arts Program to teach a class called Baltimore's Black Arts District, a Creative Archive. And what we did was we worked with about a dozen Baltimore residents, ages 16 to 29, to explore the history of Pennsylvania Avenue, which is Baltimore's Black Arts and Entertainment District. And as part of that project, we examined several archival collections at Hopkins University, including the Roy McCoy Collection at the Peabody. And then students interpreted the past in relation to their own lives by producing original photographs, images, and creative writing related to the history of Pennsylvania Avenue and what they found in the archive. And our final project was a magazine called Walking Down the Avenue, which we released digitally in April 2020 and just published in analog format. And it's full of images and writing about the history of Pennsylvania Avenue. From the Roy McCoy collection, there are quite a few photos of different brass bands and jazz bands, I believe mostly from the 1940s and 1950s. And so students looked at these archival photographs to try to imagine what it might have been like to be, a jazz performer, a musician on Pennsylvania Avenue during that time period, the 30s through the 50s. One of the students enrolled in our class plays in a marching band in Baltimore, and wrote a really interesting essay called The People's Music, Marching Band and Jazz, where he drew connections to his own experiences, especially with improvisation in his marching bands, and what he imagined might have been the experience of Roy McCoy and other people improvising in jazz bands. The Peabody Archives lent us scrapbooks and photo collections that we examined with our students at the George Peabody Library. And then we also had digital copies of those photos, which students used to create this final arts zine magazine. The purpose of this arts magazine was to connect the history of Pennsylvania Avenue with the contemporary scene on Pennsylvania Avenue. So one of the ways students did that was by going to the site in person. We went to the Arch Social Club, which is a Black mutual aid society, and conducted oral history interviews there with people who had experienced the scene. But then, students engaged with archival materials like the Roy McCoy collection to imagine what it might have been like to live, work, and play on Pennsylvania Avenue, and then responded by producing essays inspired by those archival materials, but in conversation with their own experiences, their own lives. We also used an oral history transcript from Roy McCoy. We examined that as a class, and students chose to publish a clip from that interview in the magazine that we published. So in that excerpt, he talks about going to Pennsylvania Avenue in the late 1930s. He talks about seeing Louis Armstrong at the Royal Theater at that time, and talks about how important it was to see Armstrong playing trumpet, listening to that, the kind of excitement of going to the Royal Theatre at that time. And the Royal Theatre was one of the institutions that students chose to highlight in this magazine that we produced. The fact that we had digital